We Were Only Children, written by Kevin D. Franklin. Chapter 1. The steady sound of time was teeing away as the cherry-red second hand swept the open face of the clock above the chalkboard on the wall. The classroom was dim, sounding a low hum from the fluorescent lights that randomly flickered above. Sitting at my imbalanced desk, rocking forward and backward, I rehearsed over and over again in my head the role I had in tonight's big holiday performance. That distinctive saxophone tune of Ray Anthony's 1953 dance sensation, the Bunny Hop. A tune that married my feet as I tapped to the rhythm underneath my desk. I couldn't wait for Mama to see me perform in the school's annual play. My only desire was to make her proud. If she could peer into what fueled the eagerness in my heart, she'd surely discover herself right smack dab in the middle. Abruptly, I was disturbed by the school bell ringing. That last 15 minutes had elapsed, seemingly as only seconds passing, as 3 o'clock had finally come. I gathered my school books in my backpack and headed for the after-school meetup spot before walking home, the flagpole. Usually my sister, who was 1 grade above me, and friends met at the flagpole to walk home together. Looking left, then right, glancing down to check the time on my digital Casio wristwatch, Dennis sneaks up behind me and playfully nudges me with his forearm in the center of my back. "Hey, I got a couple of extra dollars to go buy Super Slurpees for both of us. I found $5 in the hallway on the way to recess today," he exclaimed. "Let's go before your sister and the rest of the gang shows up. I don't have enough to buy everyone Super Slurpees, you know." Great, I thought to myself of how I only needed 11 more of the Major League Baseball collectible reflector coins, removed from the bottom of the cup of every Super Slurpee, to complete the entire collection. Dennis was my best friend, a blonde-head, blue-eyed, white kid who had moved into the same apartment complex that I lived in about 4 months earlier. There was a 7-Eleven convenience store adjacent to James W. Fannin Elementary on the east side of Dallas, Texas, the school I attended until 2nd grade. Looking both directions, we darted across the street for the after-school cold treat that awaited us. Making my way through the door first, I held the door open for Dennis. Heading straight for the large Super Slurpee cups, my eyes grew bigger, and with hands outstretched, I grabbed and passed one to Dennis and kept the other for myself. I placed the lid on the empty cup and filled it with half blueberry-flavored Slurpee and half cherry flavor. With the lid already on the cup, I could fill it all the way up to the tip top without making a mess. I was a professional Super Slurpee maker in those days. Exiting the convenience store, I peeled off the MLB Reflector's coin. Fidgeting it before losing my grip entirely, it hit the ground and rolled midway underneath a parked car. Before I realized it, Dennis hands me his Super Slurpee and crawls halfway under the parked vehicle from the rear. "Got it," he says. Unaware that the vehicle was running, it started to roll back. Both of my hands were occupied with holding both Super Slurpees. I couldn't do anything except yell. "Stop," I said frantically. The driver of the vehicle couldn't hear me with all windows up as the car continued slowly to reverse. Meanwhile, Dennis is screaming, trying to slide out from under the vehicle. He realizes his right hand is caught under the rear tire of the car. Clunk, I kicked the car door with the side of my foot. The driver suddenly stops and looks at me with a face of revenge, while at the same time I'm screaming to him how he had run over my friend's hand who was trapped underneath the rear of his car. He quickly shifts the car into drive and relieves poor Dennis's right hand from the weight of the automobile. As the driver exited, he panicked, running to the rear of the vehicle to find my good friend crying on the ground in a fetal position. After helping Dennis to his feet, noticing his oil-stained jeans and the fresh tire tread patterns on his right hand, as the tears in his eyes began to dry, gripping his hurt arm tenderly, he stated how the pain was starting to subside. A small crowd of bystanders quickly gathered, drawn by the commotion outside the convenience store. The constant flow of foot traffic, with people coming and going, only added to the growing curiosity. Soon, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air, a sound that filled us with hope as they steadily grew louder, nearing our location. Within moments, an ambulance turned sharply into the 7-Eleven parking lot, and the paramedics wasted no time in making their way to the scene. One glance at Dennis clutching his arm was all they needed to assess the situation. They knelt beside him, their faces serious as they began checking his vitals, shining a pin light into his eyes, monitoring his breathing, heart rate, and movement. After testing the range of motion in his injured arm, the paramedics asked Dennis a few more questions before gently loading him into the back of the ambulance. I leaned in and assured him I'd let his parents know what had happened as soon as I got back to the apartments. Dennis's father, Roger, had just recently survived a freak accident. He'd fallen 3 stories while cleaning windows on a high-rise building, breaking his neck and back. That was only a couple of weeks ago. He was incredibly lucky to be alive. And now, with Dennis in this situation, I could only imagine what his parents would feel when they heard the news. As I crossed the street towards my home, I watched as Ambulance Unit 53 pulled away, disappearing into the horizon where the midday sun blazed down. All I could think was how blessed Dennis was. Despite everything, he was walking away from this, without a single drop of blood being spilled. Meanwhile, I wondered where my sister was in her walk-home routine, and if I had the chance to catch up with her, sharing all that happened to poor Dennis before she actually made it home. We'd always be the second to the last to make it home out of our clique. But where was she? I'd not seen her at all since school let out. I began to jog, covering more ground quickly as possible, finding no trace of my sister or the gang. I cut through an apartment complex, the usual tracks of our trail, yet still to no avail. Not one trace of a single soul. Instead, there in the distance awaited an adult Hispanic guy, with a glowing red cigarette in the corner of his mouth, blocking my path as if I owed him, and it was pay me time. Something inside instantly threw me into panic mode, and I knew I had to boogie. But where could I run? I took 2 gulps of my half-drank Super Slurpee as he began charging me. Panning for escape options, I glanced down at my 6-year-old legs and thought of how I wouldn't stand a chance in trying to outrun him. I couldn't call for help. It was only him and I had nowhere to run. I was done for. With both hands gripping the left and right sections of my plaid button-down collar shirt, my Super Slurpee fell to the ground as he lifted me off both feet into the air. My bugged, semi-light brown eyes reflecting back to me from the black sunshades he wore only confirmed that this was my last day on Earth. I still, 37 years later, am taunted at times by the trauma. Suspended in midair, the smoke from the cigarette burning my virgin nostrils, he threatened and exhaled in my face words I also never forgot. "You better come back by here tomorrow, or the next time I see you will be the last time anybody else will." As the smoke from his cigarette swirled in the air around me, I struggled to hold back tears, my tiny hands gripping his wrists in desperation. "Listen here and listen good, little punk," he hissed, his voice cold as ice. "You better not tell anyone about this, understand?" I nodded frantically, too scared to speak, as he tightened his grip on my collar. My feet dangled helplessly, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced. What had I done to deserve this? Why was this happening? Then, as suddenly as he had grabbed me, he let go, dropping me roughly to the pavement. I landed on my hands and knees, my body trembling from fear and shock. The taste of blueberry and cherry Slurpee still lingered on my tongue, but the sweetness was lost in the bitterness of the moment. I heard him laugh, an ugly, mocking sound that echoed in the empty alley. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving me gasping for air and fighting back sobs. My Super Slurpee, forgotten in the chaos, had spilled, creating a dark, sticky puddle on the ground beneath me. I stood up shakily, wiping my face with the back of my hand. I wanted to run, to cry, to tell someone, anyone, what had just happened, but I couldn't. His threat rang in my ears. "You tell no one about this." Still trembling, I picked up my now empty cup and started walking. My feet felt like they were moving through quicksand, but I forced myself forward, one step at a time until I reached home. When I opened the door, Mama was waiting for me, her face lighting up when she saw me. "There you are, baby," she said with a smile. "Get ready. We gotta go soon. Your big performance is tonight." I froze for a moment, remembering the excitement I had felt earlier that day, the hope of making Mama proud, the rehearsal I had played over and over in my mind. But now, all I could think of was the cigarette smoke in my face, the weight of his hands lifting me off the ground, and his chilling words. "Are you okay, honey?" Mama asked, her smile faltering as she looked at me more closely. I forced a smile, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, Mama, I'm okay." But deep down, I wasn't. Something had changed in me that day, something I couldn't quite understand. The innocence of childhood felt suddenly distant, replaced by a lingering fear I couldn't shake. And as I got dressed for the holiday performance, trying to summon the excitement I had felt before, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever truly feel safe again. I quickly got dressed in the mirror, put on the Easter Bunny costume, and adjusted its rabbit ears while headed downstairs to the car. That night, under the bright lights of the school auditorium, I performed, all to the beat of the song, while holding the rear of the bunny costume of the one in front of me. We kicked our right foot to the right 2 times, our left foot to the left 2 times, hopping forward once, backward once, then forward 3 times. We repeated this until each of us ended at the same place in which we started. I danced, hummed, and played my part with a smile plastered on my face. The audience clapped, the music soared, and Mama beamed from the front row. Seeing Mama smile the way she did was always enough to communicate how proud she was that I was her son. Well, at least as it related to my performance that night on stage. As we were directed to exit left of the stage, the teachers high-fived us, patting us on the shoulders, cheering us on, and attempting to keep the crowd's standing ovation alive. It was apparent that we delivered a knockout performance and rocked the house that night. But inside, I wasn't celebrating. I was still that little boy, standing alone in the breezeway of my assailant's apartment complex, holding on to the memory of a threat that would haunt me for days to come. But what could he possibly want with me, I thought. Chapter 2. As we made our way back to the car, the city felt unusually quiet, as if the energy from the applause and cheers of our performance had softened the constant hum of the bustling streets. Above us, the stars twinkled with a brilliance that seemed to claim the night sky as their own, each standing out in its own uniqueness and designated glory. Reaching for the seatbelt, I buckled up as Mom turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered and stuttered, refusing to catch. Normally, by the 3rd or 4th attempt, it would roar to life. But this time, something deep inside told me it was the last ride we'd take in that car. We hadn't owned it long, but its problems had piled up quickly, like an avalanche gaining speed. Mom gripped the wheel tightly and gave it one more try, her frustration clear. "That lousy car salesman sold me a lemon," she muttered, unbuckling her seatbelt. She slumped back into the seat for a moment, glancing over at me before stepping out of the stalled car. Then her gaze landed on the silly rabbit ears I was wearing, dangle dancing on my head, and she burst into light chuckles, which quickly grew into laughter. "Well, I guess that's it. She's run her last race," Mom said with a sigh, still smiling as she accepted the inevitable. Good thing our apartment was only a few short blocks away from the school. On our way home, I hopped, skipped, and leaped over every cracked and uneven patch of the sidewalk. Behind me, I could hear my mom's soft, continuous giggles, sparked by the playful bounce of the bunny ears, casting a somewhat comedic shadow as I moved along. Approaching our apartment door, the light revealed a strange figure slumped on our doorstep. At first, all I could make out was a man clutching the back of his head with a black cloth, his white muscle shirt speckled with blood, and his khaki trousers stained with dirt. His body was covered in bruises, black, purple, and blue. But as we drew closer, my mom gasped and realized it was her good friend Martine. He was so badly beaten that he was barely recognizable. What could have happened to Martine, I wondered, stunned. He had only been in the US for about 7 months, having come from Mexico. I remembered how, just last February, when the snow first fell, he ran outside without shoes or a shirt to touch it, laughing as he experienced snow for the first time. Though my mom only knew a handful of Spanish and Martine spoke very little English, they had somehow formed a close friendship in a short amount of time. But what could have happened to Martine? Why was he beaten within inches of his life? I wondered as the shock settled in. Mom hurriedly invited him inside, locking the door behind him, and immediately began tending to his wounds. Every time her hands brushed a tender spot, Martine groaned in pain, the sound escaping involuntarily. Through gritted teeth, he started to explain. "Remember the other morning when I went out to look for lawns to mow?" he said, his voice strained. "Well, I came across a house where they said they'd hire me for some yard work and a little stonework. I started the job yesterday and just finished up about an hour ago," Martin continued, wincing slightly as he spoke. "As I was returning the lawnmower I borrowed, I accidentally knocked over the top of a small wooden crate. When I looked inside, it was filled with $20 and $50 bills, all neatly organized and rubber banded together. There were 3 crates in total, all stacked with cash identically. So before the homeowners noticed anything, I took the crates and stashed them around the corner, behind a garbage bin. Then I went back to the house to ask the man for my pay." His voice grew quieter, the tension in the room thickening. "When the guy came back, he wasn't alone. 2 other men were with him. I guess they must have realized the crates were missing as they surrounded me and jumped me," he said, the memory clearly painful. "One had a metal pipe, the other's brass knuckles. All I thought to do was close my eyes, cover my face and head as best as I could, and hope for the beating to end. Then, somewhere amid the multitude of blows, I lost consciousness," Martin recounted, lightly grazing over the 6-inch valley in the middle of his skull. Mom's face twisted with a mix of shock and empathy as she pictured the violence he had endured. She gently dabbed at his wounds, her voice soft. "Tienes suerte de haber salido con vida. Zrenia, you're blessed to have made it out alive," she said. Martin winced again but nodded. "At around 4 a.m., I'm going back to get the money and find out how much it is in total. If you can drive me to the location, I'll show you where it is, then you can grab it and bring it back here. Is that okay? No one knows who you are or where you live, and it's safer than any other place I can think of." "What do you think?" said Martin. "I think it's a great idea, Martin," Mom replied, her voice heavy with hesitation. "But there's a problem. The car stalled on us tonight. It's parked in the teacher's lot at Kevin's school. After his Easter performance, it just wouldn't start, so we had no choice but to walk home." She let out a sigh, as if the weight of the evening was pressing down on her all over again. "Oh, so that's why I saw you 2 walking from the direction of the apartment's main entrance instead of the parking lot out back," Martin said, his brow furrowing in slight disappointment. The news clearly wasn't what he wanted to hear. "What are we going to do now?" he muttered, half to himself. His gaze turned distant, his mind racing. "I have to get back there and grab that money before it becomes someone else's lucky day. No way am I letting that slip through my fingers." His voice was low, filled with a mix of determination and fear. "I'll risk getting beat up all over again before I let that happen. That's the most money I've ever seen at one time in my life," he added, as if trying to reassure himself of a plan, even though the odds seemed stacked against him. Martin, freshly clean from his blood-stained clothes and with his wounds carefully bandaged, gingerly rose to his feet. An ace bandage was tightly wrapped around his head, giving him the appearance of a makeshift mummy as he wobbled around our cramped living room. His steps were slow and uneven, like he was trying to steady both his balance and the pounding headache he'd been left with after the brutal fight. Mom, without a word, headed toward the hallway where an old straw sombrero hung on the wall. Its red-trimmed edges had always stood out, no matter where it found itself in our house. Once it had crowned a life-size teddy bear, and another time, it had served as a centerpiece on our dining room table with colorful beads scattered around it. Though it moved from place to place, it had never made its way to the trash, and I knew it held some kind of sentimental value, its history predating even my own. Now its purpose has become clear. Mom carefully placed the sombrero atop Martin's wounded head, covering the bandages. It would be the last time I ever saw that sombrero in our home. As if completing the disguise, Mom hurriedly put together what looked like a sack lunch, sliding it toward Martin. A white plastic shopping bag, the kind with "Thank you for shopping" printed in red on both sides, was tied at the top in a tight knot. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing the bag uncertainly.